Estás viendo Canal América, televisión dominicana para el mundo.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard. You don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Yeah. You try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your fears.
Welcome to a Time for Truth show. I'm your host, Dr. Bernard Fialkoff, and welcome you back to our next program. And this is going to be a very interesting program because it's going to deal with who are you really? What are your potentials? Have you ever wondered since you were a little kid, where did you come from? And when you die, where are you going? These are questions that many of us have, and sometimes we go our whole lives and they're not answered. Or we have some answers but incomplete. Or we have something called faith, and we have faith, and so we trust our faith, which is fine, because religion is very important in everyone's life to give stability, to give civilization, to give morality between the decision between right and wrong. But what proof have we ever really received as to where life comes from? Has anyone ever done a scientific study? Not to my knowledge. But it's interesting because back in 1907 approximately, in some medical journals, there were some studies published because they were trying to see if the human spirit actually had a weight. Did it weigh? Was it something that was imaginary? Was it just something nice to think that, you know, that we were a spirit or that we had a spirit? But lo and behold, they actually conducted the scientific studies, and they found that when a person died, they lost about 21 grams. The weight of a spiritual being. Very interesting result. And how many times have you gone into some different location and you get there and you go, why do I feel like I've been here before? So many of us have commented on this. Deja vu. Or you meet someone and you just hit it off unbelievably well, and you have such similarities, and it just seems like it just, well, must be just, it's just coincidence. Is it coincidence? Or is there more? Very interesting questions that sometimes in our busy life we don't answer. But if we are spiritual beings, and we have to realize that maybe more than 50% of the planet believes that we're spiritual beings. Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Scientology, Rosicrucians, many metaphysics study the spiritual world and how we as human beings actually have an effect spiritually on our lives, on an environment. And what would happen if we took a look in this manner? So many philosophers over the years have looked at this, and one who actually delved into this quite intensively was an engineer and a pilot, navigator, intelligence officer in the U.S. Navy, Mr. Hubbard, Ron Hubbard. And he did many studies, and he actually compiled from Eastern philosophies, from Western philosophies, using an engineering principle of seeing what worked. Because if you want to walk over a bridge, you don't want to fall into the canyon. You want to walk across. So he basically said, okay, let me see what actually works. Let's take out of the Eastern philosophies and the Western philosophies those principles that we can actually utilize. And lo and behold, over a period of years of research and compilation, he found the human spirit. And so he decided to codify this, and he had to make up a word. So he made up a word called logos, which is the Latin study of, like, you know, dermatology is a study of the skin, logos study, derma skin. So he made something called Scientology, logos study, skio knowledge. And this knowledge would be for a spiritual being. So let's play a video, and Buddha, if you play the first video for our viewers, let's take a look at something out of Scientology regarding spirituality and all of us as spiritual beings. Here we go.
You are not your name. You're not your job. You're not the clothes you wear or the neighborhood you live in. You're not your fears, your failures, or your past. You are hope. You are imagination. You are the power to change, to create, and to grow. You are a spirit that will never die. And no matter how beaten down, you will rise again. Scientology. Know yourself. Know life.
Interesting. So we're not our name. We're not our clothes. And is the body like another car? Some of us have different cars. And, you know, is life really where we trade our car in and come back? And as I said, more than 50% of the world believes that. I want to relate to you a very interesting story that my father, who was an emergency room physician, told me. And he had several stories because as physicians, he dealt with life and death. And he had one of his friends who was a physician who apparently died of a heart attack. And he related to my father that he felt himself leave his body and he started seeing light. And I'm sure you've heard the story from other people. And so he saw beings and he felt he was being communicated to, but not by words. And then he started feeling pressure, and he didn't understand what the pressure was, but then he felt pressure, and he felt like pressure on his chest, but he said, how can that be? Because I'm not in my body, because he was looking down, and he said when he looked down, he saw that they were giving him cardiopulmonary resuscitation. They brought him back to life. He came back into his body, and he related this story to my father, who gave it to me. Never did I think as a physician that my father would have given me this story. Took to beyond belief. I'm a conservative emergency room doctor. But then he related that there were other such stories that he'd heard from other patients, friends, and whatever. And I know that as you probably think or look, probably others have related similar stories to you, or you've seen them on YouTube and whatever. But the interesting thing would be, is if we had that viewpoint, that we were actually a spiritual being, and that we would return, that we would come back, that we would inherit what we created. Oh my God, would that change the world instantaneously? Because what would happen? All of us would realize that what we do here and now would have a tremendous impact on a world we would come back to. That wouldn't just be this time and then we leave and live in heaven. Some people don't believe in heaven or go to hell. And some people say, oh, well, earth is hell already and we have to make it into a heaven. But interesting phrases, interesting statements. So what would happen if we kept our religions? Because religions are our cultures, they're family. No reason to let go of them, but we just added into our religion that we were spiritual beings and not eliminate God. Why would you eliminate God? It's because a supreme being, it makes sense. It's logical. Where did everything come from? You know, we talk about Big Bang Theory. But what started the Big Bang Theory? Nobody ever has an answer. So in order to have a Big Bang Theory, where do these particles, where do these atoms, where do these explosions come from? Where do they originate? Very interesting questions that no one really has given answers to. And then when we look at the universe, we see that not only can we go out into the galaxies, and there are 100 billion galaxies. Imagine the space of 100 billion galaxies when Earth is this tiny speck in the Milky Way galaxy, only one. And this 100 billion is a scientific fact. And then let's take with the electron microscope and we go down into material objects and we see, we get into molecules, we get into atoms, we get into electrons, neutrons, protons, and then we get into quantum and smaller particles. And in each discovery, something very perplexing. In each particle, there's more space. But how can that be? But yet, those are scientific conclusions that if you go now, and tonight you go online, you'll see that as you go down with the electron microscope, each particle breaks down into space, and it mimics the galaxy on a smaller scale. But where's the boundary? Where are the walls to this galaxy, and where are the walls to these particles? Is there a wall? And if there's not a wall, then we take a look and we say, interesting. Is that the proof we're looking at that we're spiritual beings? Because spiritual being would not be a material being. And now if we had that viewpoint and we kept our cultures and we didn't negate what we loved and what we grew up with, we just added in something new, like we do when we added the cell phone. We didn't give up talking to each other. We didn't throw away communication. No, we applied it to what we had already. So let's look at this. If we had this viewpoint, then probably we would feel better. Some of us, as we get older, wouldn't feel so fearful of death. Some of us wouldn't feel so sorrowful that we lost someone that we loved, because we would realize that they would come back again. And how about the planet? Because we have so many people out there worried about the environment, and rightfully so. We should be concerned about environment. But wouldn't that change immediately if we realized we would inherit the environment once more? And what about those of us who, just for the sake of wealth or the sake of monetary gain or comfort, realized that those people that we had betrayed would still live on and that you would see them again in the future? That would be an interesting thought, probably leading someone to think twice before they betrayed their fellow human being. And the other fact that's very interesting that we never look at is that the name of who or what we are, a human being. Interesting that for some reason, whoever innovated or inaugurated or originated the term didn't say the human animal. Very, very interesting. And how is it that when you walk into a room, sometimes you know there's been an argument there? How are you perceiving that? From the walls? From the air? Where is that perception coming from that you know that something is going on in that room? And we go to a wedding and there's so much emotion and there's so much energy, yet there's no electricity being fed in. It's not being generated by some generator. It's not coming out of the sky. We didn't have to wait to go to heaven. So where is this energy coming from? And people say, well, yeah, of course, it's coming from us. Very interesting. But if it's coming from us, and it can be perceived, then it seems that this energy then would be real, because we're all perceiving it, because we feel it. We're excited, we're happy. And it's interesting that when we look at it that way, we see we're creating, and a marriage is something where we create the future. There's going to be a future family, hopefully. We're not going to divorce. And there's going to be a propagation of humanity. And so there's a celebration of life, L'chaim. And, but where does that energy come from? Is it coming just from the rabbi? Is it just coming from the priest? Is it the Buddhist monk who married you? Well, I say to you, no. It's coming from all of us. But if it's coming from all of us, how is it possible? And then you would see something that Mr. Hubbard discovered, is that a human being was capable of generating his own energy. And if you look at that, then you say, wow, then drugs would really be a tremendous disease. Because what you would be affecting would be a being that doesn't need drugs to feel good. And when we play sports, and we have all that excitement, and there's the excitement in the Madison Square Garden, or in the Meadowlands, where is that coming from? I don't know if we've ever looked at it. We experience it, maybe because we don't have an answer, maybe because we've given up on a belief that we could be spiritual beings. We don't look at it. But the answer, I think, becomes evident and quite real, that it's us. We're the ones that when the New York Giants win, create that energy, that vibe, that feeling, that great enthusiasm. When they won the Super Bowl against the Patriots, unbelievable. So, if that's the case, and it does come to pass, then now we start looking at life a little differently. We would look at our actions and possibly have explanations as to why a young child who apparently has never done anything wrong is born with cancer. That's horrible. It's horrible, right? And I'm sure it's bothered you like it bothered me. But if we think that that was a spiritual being who had existed before, and maybe had done some things that weren't so good for other human beings, and like all of us would feel guilty or feel remorseful and would feel that they should make up for what they had done. Interesting. It's nothing that anyone can impress upon you, but what if that child was born that way because the child had done bad actions against his fellows for a few lifetimes, because now we would look at things differently. This is not something that can be forced on anyone, but it's something we need to look at, because in today's world we have so much technology, we have so many advancements, and they're wonderful because they make life easier, more efficient, more able to do things for each other. But yet you look at some of the maladies that we're suffering from on earth right now, with hunger and famine in Africa, and we say, why haven't we solved that? We look at the drug epidemic, and we look at that 100,000 Americans have died in this recent year. And we go, but we're legalizing marijuana. How is that logical? How is that good for the economy? How can having our high school and college youth smoking marijuana that has THC levels of 25, 30, and if they vape, goes up into the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, if they use dab rigs and bongs, which are used to vaporize the marijuana. When the National Institute of Health has said that these high THC levels cause psychotic incidents in newborn babies, cause mothers to go psychotic, cause mental brain defects and brain development defects and changes in youth. How is that going to create economic growth, and at what cost? And when you look at Colorado, and you look at what's happened in Colorado with a number of hospitalizations and poisoning in the poison control centers, what are we doing? When you think about that, then a new viewpoint starts to come across that maybe spirituality and the belief in spirituality and that we possibly are spiritual beings, and the possibility that we do come back and are real. And then what would happen on our blue planet? How much prejudice would continue to occur if we realized that there was a higher order? Would we begin to solve these problems realizing that we need our planet to last more, longer, so that we can do more, so we can actually realize our full potential? And what is our full potential? Questions that really, to me, and I think to many of my friends, have never been answered. So now I'm going to put on another video for you. And this one again happens to be from Scientology, because what Scientology does is it delves into our existence and the possibility as spiritual beings. It's not something that you can be forced to believe, but it's something as Hinduism and Buddhism and other spiritual philosophies exists, and it's something that was codified, which didn't exist before, as a way, if you pursued it, that you could, like you go up a staircase, get to the top floor. And that would be really the essence of what it is a path to spiritual freedom. So let's take a look at this video, and then we will continue. Here we go, Buddha, with the next video.
This is an invitation to freedom.
Man can save his soul.
Like a bright, cool dawn after a night of prison and of thunder, we can taste that freedom sought so long.
It has not come with the blares of trumpets or the flare and flash of flame. It's come quietly, and you aren't at all sure you should believe it.
The mysteries of existence lie before our eyes.
You are a spirit. You are your own soul. You are not mortal.
You can be free.
You have been invited.
So if we take a look in history, let's look back at Greek history, Roman history, and what we call mythology. Was it mythology? Or is that the explanation we have today for what occurred centuries ago, long ago? And then we look in Egypt and some of the cuneiform and hieroglyphics, and we see pictures of things that can't be explained from the artifacts of those times. Why? What were those Egyptian artists depicting in their hieroglyphics, in their pyramids? And how did they raise those tremendous boulders and stones with the technology that they had in those times. And we look at the tales of Hercules. Was it a fallacy? Or was it possibly true? We've advanced technologically, but have we advanced in integrity? We've advanced in harnessing the atom, but was Hiroshima a good product of what we developed? What are the effects when we as mankind don't feel good about what we've done, about the wars that we've waged against each other, the murders, the deaths, the treasonous actions? Did Moses actually part the Red Sea? Or did he pass just on low tide as a modern explanation? Or did he possibly actually do that? And the plagues that happened in Egypt, very interesting when you think of some of the things that have been happening in our world in the last few years and some of the insanities occurring. So, I pause, because I pause so you can take a look. Sometimes in our hurried technological life, we don't have much time to actually look and wonder at the possibilities of what life really exists. So for you, what I would say, find out for yourself. Look. See and possibly reinvestigate things that you put aside or said were too unbelievable to believe, and find out what you really believe and really in your heart brings out your emotion, and what brings it out in the confirmations and the baptisms and the bar mitzvahs and the fiestas and the holidays that we all love, that bring out that energy. And find the source of energy and see for yourselves if we aren't actual spiritual beings and inherit what we create today and what we blame on others. I hope that you've enjoyed this broadcast. It's a little off the normal trail. Hopefully you'll back upon this in the future and say, that's where I started to realize that I should change my habit patterns and treat people better. That's when I realized I was a human being and not an animal. That's when I realized at the very least that I should go to the temple, the church, the synagogue. Remember my words. This doesn't exclude religion, creed, culture. That's what makes us who we are. Individual human beings who love to play. I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and from A Time for Truth, may you never be the same again, and may we have a beautiful blue planet for eons to come. Good night.
Sometimes life can be so damn hard, you don't know where to go. Everything keeps falling apart. Try to do your best, but only God knows that you've given everything you've got, but the world takes you down. You just keep moving on. Let your feet